now recognize Mr. McGovern.
Thank you very much. Ranking Member DeLauro, I'm going to play devil's advocate just for a second, make believe I'm a Republican. So I'm going to ask this question. How can we afford to send money overseas when we have needs at home? Make sure your mic's on, yeah.
I appreciate that. If you just would indulge me for a moment, I think I got to dispel this myth that people are under. Chief Justice Rehnquist, with respect to the suggestion that the president has a constitutional power to decline to spend appropriated funds, we must conclude that existence of such broad power is supported neither by reason nor precedent. Disabuse yourself of this notion that this president or any president, Republican, Democrat, does not have the power to impound. I will get to your question now. Listen, we spend less than 1/2 of 1% of gross national product on overseas assistance. Current spending is 50% less in real terms spent on diplomacy and development than during the Cold War. 1 out of every 4 countries have populations that face severe hunger, exacerbating conflict, instability in hotspots around the world, and directly impacts the U.S. national and economic security. What is the PRC doing? My colleagues are in fear of the People's Republic of China, has increased development spending and financing by over 430% over the last 10 years. And that's of available data. China is surpassing the U.S. as the largest trading partner in many countries in Latin America and Africa. China has more embassies and consulates, diplomats, and foreign assistants than anyone else in the world. They challenge us, democracy and capitalism around the world, going virtually unchallenged. Let me just also say, I want to just say, they talk about waste, fraud, and abuse in these programs. Let's take a look at what we're talking about in the programs, because I think it's really critically important to note what we are really talking about here. Maternal and child health.
It doesn't sound like a woke program to me, or a government waste, yeah.
Maternal and child health? Hell, okay. You know, let's get rid of it all. Let's not worry about maternal morbidity or mortality. Development activities, water and sanitation. Let's talk about PEPFAR. 26 million people. 26 million people on life-saving antiretroviral treatment. 2.3 million adolescent girls and young women reached with comprehensive HIV prevention services. 6.6 million orphans, vulnerable children, and their caregivers receive critical care and support. 2.5 million people newly enrolled on PrEP to prevent HIV infection. 83.8 million people provided with HIV testing services, and 342,000 health workers directly supported by PEPFAR. You got humanitarian needs, you got education needs. You know, I'm not sure people even know what they're making reference to in terms of woke. These are the programs that are part of what is being rescinded illegally. It was illegally stolen, and now we're coming around to rubber stamp to say it's okay.
Mr. Aderholt, speaking of PEPFAR, this rescissions package cuts $400 million from PEPFAR, which is an overwhelmingly bipartisan program created by President George W. Bush to combat the global HIV crisis. This program alone has saved, as Mr. DeLauro pointed out, has saved 26 million people from dying of HIV and enabled more than 8 million babies to be born HIV-free. There are now tens of millions of people on life-saving treatment, with PEPFAR accounting for over 90% of preventative treatments around the world. Your bill pulls the rug from under this program and kneecaps 20 years of bipartisan progress. Don't you agree, Mr. Aderholt, that eliminating HIV as a public health threat is an important goal that the U.S. should continue to pursue?
Well, as you know, this proposal that's been presented here to Congress, and let me just say, this is the president's proposal, and Congress has the ability to vote it up or down. But But a lot of there is a lot of this money is.
Excuse me, we're not going to have a separate vote on this. We're going to have to vote for this rescissions package.
Oh,
all or
right,
nothing.
but we,
Right.
like I said, it will be, Congress will be allowed to vote on it. This is something the president just proposing. But the rescissions package proposes to rescind 500 million from this account, but that's roughly only 12% of the funding.
Well, let me just ask you, I just asked you, I mean, do you think that, the question was, do you think that eliminating HIV as a public health threat is an important goal that the U.S. should continue to
It
pursue?
is, but there are a lot of things that's included in these programs that go beyond that. The equity programs, the LGBTQI plus.
Yeah, we're talking about PEPFAR, right?
Well, a lot of these are being misspent, and
PEPFAR is being
so-
misspent. Let me say, some Republicans have rightly expressed concern over these cuts, but I wonder if those who express concerns are going to do anything about it. For example, one Republican congressman from Florida said that PEPFAR, quote, saved a generation, end quote. And in 2023, President Bush wrote an op-ed that there is no program more pro-life than the one that has saved more than 25 million lives. Do you agree with President Bush that a program that has saved now more than 26 million lives is pro-life?
Again, this is not completely cutting out this program.
You are decimating this program. A $400 million cut is huge. You know, I don't. The idea that it's kind of like the discussion we had today on the floor about a $300 million cut from SNAP. Don't worry, it's not. Nothing's going to be impacted. I don't know of a single person associated with combating HIV/AIDS around the world who doesn't say, including some of the founders of PEPFAR, who worked with the Bush administration, that this will have a devastating impact. And what are you basically saying? We can all work around this, and there'll be no impact?
I think my understanding of what the president was requesting to restore the integrity of these programs and trying to get out the waste, fraud, and abuse that we've seen in it, and
Well, I haven't seen the administration's statement of the waste, fraud, and abuse in PEPFAR. Look, since taking office, President Trump has illegally, as Mr. DeLauro pointed out, attempted to dismantle USAID, which has threatened the lives of millions of people who rely on this funding to prevent or treat diseases, afford food, and get access to clean water. Do you know how many deaths have been caused by Trump's decision to discontinue funding for USAID?
I'm assuming you tell me.
Yeah, well, according to Boston University School of Public Health, which is tracking the impact of these cuts, over 106,000 adults and over 200,000 children have already died due to the illegal termination of these programs. Do you know how many have died of HIV due to the disruption of PEPFAR already? More than 50,000 adults and 6,000 infants. Do you know how many children have died of malaria? More than 29,000. Do you know how many people have died of tuberculosis as a result of these cuts? More than 25,000. I mean, global health programs, I hate to, burst the bubble of my Republican friends over here. I mean, global health programs are not some woke initiative. These are a good investment. I mean, this rescission would eliminate public health, security, global cooperation, and America's reputation as a principled and effective leader. Ranking Member DeLauro, isn't it true that poorly controlled outbreaks can have severe economic and social consequences? Like, what happens if the U.S. no longer has staff embedded within other countries and we're not notified that a disease needs to be addressed? Won't that increase the likelihood of that disease coming to our districts, the United States?
That's precisely right. These illnesses don't know borders. If we are not on the ground doing what we need to do in global health, then we are at risk. We are gravely at risk, whether it is a pandemic, whether it is Zika, whether it is Ebola, or anything else. If we do not have people on the ground, if we do not have the CDC people who are there, or others who are there, who can really translate for us what is happening and deal with prevention, these diseases cross borders. They don't say, okay, stop, I'm not going to the United States today. It is so foolish what is being done to not only isolate the United States, but put us health-wise in great jeopardy. And there's no rationale for it, to take away these opportunities for us to
Right.
safeguard the health security of the United States. If you can't think about others or whether they're going to live or die, think about the health security of the people in the United States.
Yeah, and let's be forthcoming here, that the administration has already withheld money from a lot of these programs. That's why people are already dying as a result of these cutbacks. Let me just...
Food and humanitarian
Yeah, right.
assistance,
Yeah.
rampant.
Let me just add, maybe do a little math here. Mr. Aderholt, under the Republican tax scam, CBO says the deficit will increase by $3 trillion. How much bigger is $3 trillion in tax cuts than the $9.4 billion that you're rescinding in this bill? It's 320 times bigger. To kind of put this, what we're doing here in perspective. And under the Republican tax scam, CBO says the top 5% of earners will get a $1.6 trillion tax cut. How much bigger is the $1.6 trillion in tax cuts for the wealthy than the $9.4 billion that Republicans are rescinding in this bill? 170 times bigger. Look, it is clear that this rescissions package is a moral failure masquerading as fiscal responsibility. These so-called savings are a drop in the bucket compared to their giveaways for the wealthiest among us. It's a drop in the ocean. And at what human cost? These aren't, PEPFAR is not a woke program. I mean, it is one of the most successful programs that has ever been created to combat, a public health emergency. And before the rescissions in this bill, the FY25 funds were already $10 billion below the total humanitarian resources in the prior year. And this rescission would pull back $1.3 billion in funding to the most vulnerable people in the world: malnourished children, refugees, people fleeing violence. The historic level of humanitarian need flies in the face of this rescission. By mid-2024, nearly 123 million people had been forcibly displaced by conflict and violence, marking the 12th consecutive annual increase. And the United States is helping to support displaced populations from Afghanistan, Burma, Ethiopia, Iraq, Somalia, Sudan, South Sudan, Syria, Ukraine, Venezuela, Yemen, and elsewhere. Ranking Member DeLauro, how can the administration make the argument that these funds are not needed? And in particular, how would the rescission package affect Ukraine?
Well, first of all, let me just say the one thing you mentioned: support through programs like Gavi that have vaccinated more than 1.1 billion children and prevented more than 18.8 million future deaths. You talked about malnutrition. Costs the world $3.5 trillion in lost productivity and healthcare costs each year. According to UNICEF, at least 14 million children are now expected to face disruptions to nutrition from the cuts already made by donors. Tell me, Ukraine is to walk away from the assistance for Ukraine. Ukraine is that flagship that says we will hold democracy sacrosanct in our world. Ukraine. And to fritter around, and whether it is the kind of social service help that we provided, security assistance that we provided, if we are not providing that, then we should stand back and say, go ahead, Mr. Putin, take it all, take it on.
I mean, we're supposed to be a leader in the world, and being a leader in the world has to mean more than just sending bombs to every country in the world.
What is it that they use? It says
Right.
everything is
Let me
brutality.
just close with this one thing. So today on the House floor, Ms. Houchin and I got into a debate over the reconciliation package. And she went through a list of all the reasons why the big, ugly bill was such a good thing for us to pass, and bragging about all the things that were in the bill, including the fact that the bill removes the tax on gun silencers that has been on the book for a century. And according to the Independent Joint Committee on Taxation, ending the tax on gun silencers costs $1.5 billion. $1.5 billion. That's more than the $1.1 billion Republicans are, quote, saving by eliminating all funding for public TV and radio. I mean, at the end of the day, this is a discussion about values and morals, you know, and what is important. Mr. Aderholt, I don't know, how can you justify eliminating funding for public TV and radio, which millions of Americans rely on, particularly in rural areas, where people have no other source of local news, when Republicans are taking these savings to give a big tax cut for gun silencers? I mean, how do you justify any of these cuts to programs that feed kids or combat disease? I mean, if we're trying to save money, I mean, how, removing the tax on gun silencers, like, why is that more important than funding some of the programs that we're here talking about?
I think the bottom line is, I think we've got to remember, America has invested, I think we agree, has saved a lot of lives
Yes.
in the past.
Yes.
But where we would disagree, by this rescission package, it's not going to stop that. We will continue to do that, and I think anybody who's concerned about some of this stuff with,
Mr. Aderholt,
with the foreign policy, you should
Mr.
support
Aderholt,
this.
it already, funding for many of these programs has already stopped. So we are seeing the effects of this right now. And again, I just find it, just stunning that you guys don't have a problem with removing the tax on gun silencers, but somehow you want to, which is at $1.5 billion, but somehow you want to cut, money for public TV and radio or PEPFAR or other humanitarian programs. I don't know. I mean, did the Assassins Lobby ask for the repeal on, on the tax on gun silencers? I just find this so fundamentally wrong that, this Congress passed a bill to remove the tax on gun silencers, and says that we have to cut money to combat HIV/AIDS because we got to find savings. I think that's a moral failing, and I'll yield to Mr. DeLauro for his last word.
I would just say that you asked about Ukraine, but is the elimination of all of the civilian funding intended to support Ukraine and other partners in Eastern Europe and Central Asia who are all facing aggression from Putin. You can't say at the one side, we've got to, stop Russia, stop Putin, and then open the door for Putin to come in and to take over in these places. I think, just as a final point here, I have to go back. This debate, we shouldn't be having this debate because there is no legal basis for stealing congressionally directed taxpayer funds. That has been established in law and in our Constitution. And now they're trying to find a way to rubber stamp Elon Musk's destruction, if you will, the road to destruction, what they have done. And you cherry pick out of the Empowerment Control Act the provision which says is where you should have started of looking at how we might deal with looking at rescinding money with the 45-day limit. And you want to cherry pick that and then say, okay, that's what we're doing, and we're going to codify these. It is really unconscionable as to the havoc that is being wrought on both in terms of impoundment and dismantling the federal government. And that's what President Trump Russ Vought and Elon Musk are all about, and my Republican colleagues will rubber stamp that effort.
And Mr. Aderholt, I think, did you want to respond?
Well, let me just say, you know, we've talked a lot about the PEPFAR, and I know that's been an issue but with this rescissions of, I think it's around a little more than $8 billion that's been rescinded, total funding for diplomacy and foreign assistance is still $51 billion. So
Yeah,
it's,
but-
you know, I don't think we should get the picture that there's going to be
no, but
like
But
$100.
because of what has already been withheld, I went through a list of the number of deaths that have already occurred, all right? And that is just going to get worse with this additional cut. And I'll just close with this. I have always believed America's greatness is in our humanity. And I think what we see here is that my Republican friends somehow think our greatness is in our inhumanity. I can't believe we're doing this. I cannot believe we're doing this. And by the way, this is the tip of the iceberg. Wait till we get to some of the other programs that are being unilaterally halted right now, like the McGovern Dole school feeding program, feeding poor kids in school settings, one of the most successful anti-hunger programs we have. But in any event, I don't want to belabor this point.
Well, Mr. Vought said that this is the first of a rescission package.
Yeah, no, I know.
And this is a test.
Right,
And then they're
yeah.
going to come back with more rescissions,
I-
which is in violation, and people need to understand that.
I thank you both. I yield back.